If you find your mask hard to breathe through, hot to wear, or generally uncomfortable, then this is the video for you. In this video, I will demonstrate how to make this much lighter, airier, and more comfortable mask. Not only is this less than half the weight and so much easier to wear, but is actually almost twice as safe as a standard cotton mask. This is a great solution in hot or humid environments, as well as for those who feel vulnerable and desire more protection. Making this new mask will be liberating. Stay to the end where I will show you how to harvest quality wire and make comfortable straps for a great fit. If you want all the scientific data on this mask, click the link above to watch that video. Let's buy our fabrics and start sewing. Based on the fabric research in my last video, we need to use stretch chiffon made of 90% polyester and 10% spandex. My usual thought when I hear the word chiffon is a very, very fine, silky, see-through, drapey fabric. This stretch chiffon is not what I normally think of, again, when I hear chiffon. So it's much thicker, much more opaque, a slight bit stretchy, but not very much, and has a slightly fuzzy feel to it. Again, this is nearly twice as safe as 2 layers of regular cotton, is lighter, and for me is easier to breathe through. I purchased mine from Joann Fabrics, which is linked below. 1/4 yard will allow you to make 3 masks, and 1/2 yard will yield 9 masks. You will also need hem and strap fabric. I use knit fabric in the same color as the background of your face fabric, or a neutral shade that complements your face fabric. Any knit, whether it is 100% cotton, a cotton poly blend, or rayon will work well, but my favorite is 82% nylon and 18% spandex. This is often in the athletic wear fabric section. You will need 1.5 inches of fabric length by the fabric width for every 2 masks. That means you will need 1/8 yard for 3 masks and 1/4 yard for 9 masks. Choose a matching thread color or neutral color to match the background of your face fabric. I recommend that you also choose a thread color to match your hem fabric and use both colors at the same time, one in the bobbin and the other in the needle. I only use the face 1 piece of the Olsen mask pattern linked below. Print it out and make sure you check that the gauge box measures 1 inch. Go ahead and cut that out. If you are making many masks, then I recommend that you cut 3 so you can easily confirm that your pieces will all dovetail down the length of your fabric. Using a permanent marker, draw an arrow pointing up. Make sure that you can see the arrow bleed through to the other side of the paper. Fold your face fabric from selvage to selvage with the wrong sides together. If you wish to cut several masks at once, you can fold the fabric in thirds or accordion pleat your fabric and cut up to 3 masks at a time. As long as the arrow on your pattern points to the upper cut edge, you can flip the pattern on its face in order to dovetail cuts and use your fabric most efficiently. If you are cutting 1 mask, then just fold 1 selvage towards the other, but only as far as needed to fit the pattern piece. I know many people have expressed concerns over the use of pins in mask making. Let's look at the damage pins leave under the magnifier. As I put the pin in the fabric and move it around and then remove it, you can see that the pins leave less of a hole than the space between the threads in the weave of the fabric. The pins push the weave aside, and once I move the fabric a bit to simulate working with it, the weave moves back into place. In my video on the best mask fabrics revealed, I showed that research suggests that the masks that gap by 1% have a reduced filtration efficiency rate by about 50%. 1% of this mask is about the size of a penny. I calculated that there are approximately 900 pinholes in the surface area of a penny. Most pinholes do not leave a permanent mark in the fabric. The natural openings in the weave of the fabric, as well as the fit and proper wearing of the mask, are of far greater significance to the filtration rating of the mask than the pinholes. We are working with chiffon, and so a few pins are necessary to manage this fabric. However, to be safe and err on the side of caution, we will just use a few pins in the seam allowance for now, and we will use magic clips later. Cut out your face pieces. You may also want to use a sharp rotary cutter, but I found that it was best to then just cut 2 to 4 layers of fabric at a time. We need to cut our hem fabric into 1-inch strips of knit fabric by the width of the fabric. To easily do this, fold the fabric several times from selvage to selvage and cut a short line through all layers. You can mark a line or just estimate and try to cut straight with shears, or use a cutting mat and a straight edge with a rotary cutter. Unfold this strip and cut the strip in half. Each half is enough for one mask. If you are making lots of masks at once, you can skip cutting this strip in half. We also need to cut our straps or ties out of this fabric. Cut a 1/2 inch strip of knit in line with the cut edge. Then cut in half to make 2 straps. You will need 1 strap per mask. Use a sharp, thin needle in your machine. I am using the 7010 Sharp. We will start by making a narrow French seam on the curved edge of the mask. Take 2 face pieces, still with wrong sides together as they were cut, and sew them together on the curved seam 1/16 inch from the raw edge. Make sure your edges are exactly even. You will probably need a few pins in the seam allowance to keep the fabric from slipping. Here are some tips to working with chiffon on this seam. At the beginning, make sure you have the top raw edge under the presser foot when you lower it to help anchor the fabric and reduce the likelihood that the fabric will bunch up into the hole in the needle plate. You may leave a slight gap at the beginning of the seam, but that will be covered up later. In order to feed this material through with a nice sweeping curve and consistent seam allowance, go slow and keep pressure in the middle of the face piece on the left while you gently correct with your right hand before the presser foot. There is no reason to back tack on either side of this seam. In fact, if you are making several masks at once, just go ahead and pin them all and then feed them through the machine with only about 1/4 inch of space between them. At the end of this seam, cut your threads and inspect your work. If you are off your 1/16 inch mark, trim to 1/16 so the raw edges don't show through to the other side. If your seam has a little jog or other imperfection, don't worry because it will be covered up in just a moment. Turn your mask with right sides together along the seam line. Pin close to the fold and sew the same curved seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the fold. You have just created a very narrow French seam which beautifully finishes your raw edges. Since this is a single layer mask, it is important to have all seams finished so they don't fray with washing and wearing. Open your mask and lay it out with the right side facing you. Take a 1-inch strip of the knit and stretch it slightly. It will roll toward the wrong side. Pin this strip to the mask along the long top edge with right sides together. That means you will be looking at the right side of your face fabric and the rolled up side of the knit. Begin by overhanging the knit strip by 1 inch on the left side. This helps you avoid bunched fabric and gives you a little handle to help pull the chiffon through if needed. Place 1 pin in the seam allowance and slightly stretch your knit and match it to the face raw edge as you sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. As you get to the center seam, just allow the presser foot to push the center French seam towards you as you sew, while still making sure the top seam is fully open on the seam line. You do not need to back tack on either end of this seam. It may make sense to pin down the entire strip, but I like to let it naturally stretch under the weight of the presser foot and avoid dealing with puckers at the pinned points. The key is to just go slow and readjust your work as needed. If you are making one mask, then cut the knit fairly flush with the edge of the mask. If you are making several masks, then you can just feed in the next mask under the knit strip without cutting your thread or the knit strip. Repeat this process on the other long side with the remainder of the knit strip or the next knit strip, making sure you push the center French seam allowance away from you this time as you sew. With the needle in the fabric, you may need to lift the presser foot, adjust the French seam, and then continue to sew. Cut the knit strip close to the end of the mask. To complete the hem, turn the raw edge of the knit down to the seam and then roll the knit to the wrong side of the mask along the seam. Use magic clips as I am doing here to keep it in place. I start with the middle of the hem and then position each far edge. I then stretch the hem a bit in between and roll it down the rest of the way as I clip it in place. This is where you may want your bobbin thread to be the color of your face fabric and your top thread to be the color of your knit so that all the top stitching is color matched. Sew 3/8 inch top stitching on the hem fabric. Make sure you control your fabric by sewing slowly, adjusting ever so slightly, making sure the fold is on the seam or even rolled further back a bit, and that the center seam is open flat on the seam line. Again, you do not need to back tack on these seams. If you are making many masks in a line and have lots of magic clips on hand, you can just roll back the entire strip of fabric over about 4 masks and then sew one top stitching seam down the entire length of the strip. Cut the masks apart afterwards, eliminating lots of cutting and saving a lot of thread. If your chiffon is pulling severely on one half of the mask, try not pulling the knit quite as much, or try sewing from the center seam towards each of the outer edges. There is always a direction in fabric grain, and if you try to sew against the grain on a curve such as this, it often will obviously pull and pucker. If you do this, be careful to match the center seam as closely as possible because it will be very noticeable on the top of your nose. Now is a good time to hold it up and see if it is too wide on your face. You could just estimate how much you may need to cut off, or you can measure from the center of the bridge of your nose to the center of your ear where it meets your cheek. For me, that is 5 inches. You need 1 inch of fabric for the strap channels. So I need 5 inches for the mask and another 1 inch for the channels for a total of 6 inches. Go ahead and measure your mask from the center seam to the edge. Mine is 6.5 inches. So in my case, I only need 6 inches, but have 6.5 inches. So I will go ahead and cut off 1/2 inch on each of the cheeks. To do this, I just fold the mask in half, arrange all the excess knit and threads, and then cut off the needed amount on all layers at once. As a bonus, this takes less time than cutting and snipping individual threads. If you need the width, then just cut the knit flush and trim the threads as usual. Roll over about 1/4 inch on the raw edge and then another 3/4 of an inch or so for the elastic channels. Don't hesitate to adjust the amount or direction of the channel for best fit. Remember that fabric is very important in making an effective mask, but an excellent fit is probably just as important. Pin or wonder clip the channel into place and sew. You must back tack on both ends of this seam. I really like using magic clips here because I can use them as little pushing handles to get all that seam bulk under my presser foot. Stitch close to the left folded edge. Thread the thin knit strip into a yarn needle and then thread through the channels. Go from the bottom of the mask up through the channel and then back down again through the opposite channel. If this is your mask, try it on and tie to fit. I like to wear both of my straps around my neck under my hair, with the upper strap just over my ears. Once knotted to fit, the knit straps should stretch enough for you to put it on and take it off over your head without untying it. If you would rather get more room than just stretching it over your head, you could use a cord lock like this. Just thread the ends through one at a time. Whether I use a cord lock or just knot the straps, I then knot each strap an inch or two down from the cord lock or knot, and then cut it off. If this mask is to be delivered to someone else, I just tie the straps into a slip knot for the final wearer to adjust themselves. To ensure a best fit, wear this mask with a wire. With wire cutters, cut about a 6-inch length of 14-gauge copper wire from new old electrical wiring. I strip the outer casing with a utility knife and peel it back to expose the inner wires. Pull out the wires and choose either the black, white, or copper that best complements your fabric colors. Some fabrics are very sheer and they will show the wire color on the inside. In order to create a channel for the wire to rest, just snip a hole in the upper right knit hem, making sure you do not snip the chiffon. If your wire is sharp, then you can add a drop of hot glue to each end for fabric and eye protection. Slide in the wire. Mold the wire to your nose and cheekbones. The chiffon fabric bolt instructs us to hand wash in soapy water, hang to dry, and avoid bleach. The hem fabric tells us to machine wash in a gentle and cold cycle with non-chlorine bleach and line dry. However, let me read the washing recommendations from the WHO's June 5, 2020 Interim Guidelines publication, which is linked below. Wash in warm, hot water, 60 degrees Celsius, with soap or laundry detergent. Where hot water is not available, wash mask with soap detergent at room temperature water, followed by either boiling mask for 1 minute or soak mask in 0.1% chlorine for 1 minute, and then thoroughly rinse mask with room temperature water to avoid any toxic residual of chlorine. My fabrics contain 10% to 18% spandex, and my bleach container says to avoid bleaching spandex. So the fabrics I chose contradict both the WHO and the Clorox washing recommendations. So I decided to experiment. I mixed up a container of bleach solution according to the WHO guidelines. I used about 1 tablespoon of bleach with a quart of water, or if you prefer 1 liter of water with about 20 milliliters of bleach. I cut samples of my fabrics, put a set of samples in the bleach solution for 1 minute, and then rinsed them, and another set of samples in boiling water for 1 minute to see how they would react. My samples all came out seemingly unscathed. However, I am not sure how the fabric would react with multiple bleach or boiled treatments over time. I recommend you test your fabrics before you decide to bleach or boil. If you absolutely must clean them with bleach or boiling water, then you may just be making more replacement masks more frequently. Otherwise, I just hand wash in warm soapy water, roll in a towel to remove as much moisture as possible, and hang to dry. If your mask gaps or doesn't fit you well, please see my video on how to resize your mask. I hope you will appreciate how safe and easy this mask is to wear as much as I do. May you be safe and comfortable while visiting those you love, shopping around town, and working in your mask. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.